The Church in the DR Congo, A Personal Perspective. Part 9, The Temple, Holiness to the Lord. In this episode, we discuss the holiness of the temple and of the people who are preparing for it. During the last half of our mission, my wife and I lived in an apartment building directly across the street from the construction site. I thought it was particularly fitting that the apartment number was 406, corresponding to the month and day the church was formally organized in 1830. We watched with interest from the rooftop as work on the temple progressed. We passed the temple entrance at an even closer range whenever we walked to our meeting house, which sat on the same piece of property. As we went by, the workers would sometimes signal their love and joy to us by their gestures from the rooftop. At one point, the steel structure atop the temple steeple was taken down for a while because it was not constructed correctly. At the temple groundbreaking, Elder Neil L. Anderson reminded his listeners that everything has to be near perfection in temple construction. Everyone was glad when the rebuilt steeple went back into place again. It was a thrill to see the professionalism of the construction workers who had been contracted to build the temple. They went the extra mile to make sure that the structure would conform to the high standards required for the house of the Lord. Over and beyond this professionalism, the essential construction skills learned through patience and persistence, there was a soberness of loving submission in the task of building a temple, a quality of the heart that added an intangible spiritual element to the work being performed. This spiritual element was evident in the attention paid to tiny details of the landscaping, in the pride and camaraderie fueled by a common sense of purpose, and in the quiet dignity and diligence with which even the most tedious tasks were undertaken. A sincere smile bubbled up to break the surface seriousness of this dedicated worker, eloquently bespeaking things that cannot be said in words, born of the joy of being a small part of a work much greater than oneself. The joy of these workers is contagious. You cannot help but love them. They are not merely building a temple for the Lord. They are working with the Lord to build a place of holiness within their own souls. Imagine our anticipation as we saw the culminating work begin around the temple doorway in preparation for the inscription plaque, a reminder to everyone who would be worthy to enter to continually cultivate holiness in their hearts. Holiness to the Lord, the house of the Lord. Significantly, so far as we know, the phrase holiness to the Lord never appeared on buildings in Old Testament times. It was, however, applied to select individuals. The Israelites were instructed to engrave these words on a plate of pure gold that was to be worn upon the forehead of high priests who had been consecrated to the Lord's service through sacred ordinances. Anything, or any one thus consecrated, became sacrosanct, subject wholly to the Lord's purposes and under his personal protection and care. To wear the plate of pure gold engraved with holiness to the Lord on the forehead was a divinely bestowed honor of the greatest significance. It identified the high priest with the Lord himself. It did not mean that the high priests were themselves already holy and pure in every respect, for they had not yet completed the process of sanctification. Rather, it meant that they had been chosen or set apart to take upon themselves solemn covenants that put them under divine obligation to live up to the holiness to which they had been set apart. The obligation of all the saints to live up to the holiness to which they have been set apart is particularly incumbent upon each person who enters the temple. In 2001, President Russell M. Nelson stated, "Those who enter the temple are to bear the attribute of holiness. It may be easier to ascribe holiness to a building than it is to a people. We can acquire holiness only by enduring and persistent personal effort. As temples are prepared for our members need to prepare for the temple." End of quote. The Congolese saints have been preparing through their faithfulness for a temple more than 3 decades. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Elder Anderson explained that the long-awaited announcement of a temple for Kinshasa meant that the Lord, quote, had revealed to his prophet that there was a righteous people prepared and ready for it. Then he prophesied, quote, The construction of this temple means that the restored kingdom of God will be established in Kinshasa and throughout the Democratic Republic of the Congo until the Lord returns to the earth, with a covenant people here to welcome him when he comes. The pace of the Congolese saints along the path of holiness will increase as they return frequently to the temple in their midst. Who shall separate them from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress, or persecution or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? Shall anything stop the rolling forth of the kingdom of God? The Lord has given his answer. How long can rolling waters remain impure? What power shall stay the heavens? As well might man stretch forth his puny arm to stop the Congo River in its decreed course, or to turn it upstream, as to hinder the Almighty from pouring down knowledge from heaven upon the heads of the Congolese Latter-day Saints.